Good evening, everyone. We begin the readout tonight with Russia's relentless assault against Ukrainian civilians. As the number of refugees tops 3 million in a matter of weeks, many are facing food and medicine shortages, along with the constant threat of deadly shelling and air attacks. According to the Telegram channel of a Ukrainian official, about 20,000 people left Mariupol today in private cars through a humanitarian corridor. While Kyiv, the capital, under increasing fire, has imposed a new curfew as its mayor braces his city for a difficult and dangerous moment.
The spirit right now, everyone is angry. I talk to the people. They don't want to leave. It's international criminal case. What Russians do it with civilian people in our country.
The increasing assault comes as 3 European Union leaders traveled by train to Kyiv in a show of solidarity. Here's video posted on Ukraine's Telegram channel of Zelensky meeting with the prime ministers of the Czech Republic, Poland, and Slovenia. While President Biden, in a display of unity with NATO leaders, will head to Brussels next week. President Volodymyr Zelensky continues to drum up support from leaders abroad. Here he is today in a virtual address to Canadian lawmakers.
They already killed 97 Ukrainian children. We are not asking for much. We're asking for justice, for real support, which will help us to prevail, to defend, to save life all of the world.
The Ukrainian president is set to make that pitch to the U.S. Congress tomorrow morning, as cities and towns are reduced to rubble. And as casualties mount, including the deaths of 2 journalists working for Fox News, we're reminded that the invasion has and will continue to be a war against civilians.
Нас бомбят каждый день с утра до ночи. У нас гибнут мирные жители. Невозможно передать словами то, что чувствуют все матери, весь наш народ. Это утрата, ее невозможно описать словами. Это кошмар, который творит Россия на территории Украины.
And for those who couldn't catch all the subtitles, some of what this Ukrainian woman is saying is, we are bombed during the day and during the night. We are peaceful civilians, and it is a nightmare what Russia is doing. Of course, Russia has done the same to Syrians when Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, with Russian support, used many of the brutal tactics now seen in Ukraine. In a powerful rebuke that went viral in 2016, Samantha Power, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations at the time, accused Assad and his Russian and Iranian allies of putting a noose around civilians.
Your barrel bombs and mortars and airstrikes have allowed the militia in Aleppo to encircle tens of thousands of civilians in your ever-tightening noose. It is your noose. 3 member states of the UN contributing to a noose around civilians. It should shame you. Instead, by all appearances, it is emboldening you. You are plotting your next assault. Are you truly incapable of shame? Is there literally nothing that can shame you?
Joining me now is Samantha Power, who is the administrator of the United States Agency for International Development. Administrator Power, thank you so much for being here. I am pleased to get the chance to talk with you. I will note for our audience that you began your career as a journalist, and you have covered the sort of wars and horrors that have taken place in places like Bosnia and East Timor, Rwanda, Sudan, Zimbabwe. When you look at what's happening in Ukraine right now, do you see the same kinds of, let's be blunt, war crimes?
Well, when you intentionally strike civilians, it's a war crime. It's fairly straightforward. And it is very clear when you see in city after city that the tactics that the Russian Federation are employing are consistent. They are denying food, medicine, water into civilian areas, and they are shelling residential buildings, maternity hospitals, more than 31 medical facilities that have been verified, probably more once there's more access granted. So it is as dark as anything I've seen in my life, in my career.
Do you think that the impunity with which Russia has been allowed to operate in places like Syria, the fact that their mercenaries have operated in places like Zimbabwe, and there's been no repercussions for Putin, there's been no repercussions for Bashar al-Assad in the, complete laying waste to Aleppo with the help of Russian forces. Do you think that that impunity communicated in some way to Putin that he could get away with this, and that might be the problem, that he needs to be personally sanctioned for what's happening?
Well, as you know, he has been personally sanctioned, as has the Russian economy and so many sources of wealth and income for the oligarchs who have surrounded and enabled and abetted Putin. Our focus is on keeping this unprecedented coalition together. In the Syria crisis, notwithstanding gas attacks and the attacks on Aleppo, there was a lot more division than there is now. You could not have mobilized the kind of UN General Assembly rebuke that Ambassador Thomas Greenfield mobilized along with her Ukrainian colleagues just a week ago. So this unity, this squeeze on the Russian economy, this imposition of costs, the strategic failure that we are witnessing, even as Russia again may secure a tactical success here or there and may wreak terror on civilians, but fundamentally, Vladimir Putin is not able to achieve his objectives in Ukraine. That is clear.
Do you think, and ultimately you're correct, he's been personally sanctioned, but will he ultimately go the way of Slobodan Milosevic? Could he be, in theory, tried for war crimes ultimately for what he's done?
Life is long, and I can't speculate. I wish I knew what was coming tomorrow, never mind in the distant future. But I think what's important is we in the U.S. government and our European friends are funding the partners that we have been funding for years as they moved in a democratic direction, as they sought to integrate their economy with Europe, as they sought to build the rule of law and end the kind of impunity that we see officials in the Russian government enjoy. Those same groups that we've been funding for years for those purposes, many of them have now turned their sights to gathering evidence, knowing that the International Criminal Court has announced that it plans to open an investigation, knowing that the Human Rights Council last week created a commission of inquiry where a lot of that evidence will ultimately be funneled. So there's personal accountability for individuals who've had their assets frozen, who won't be able to travel, who've seen their rubles depreciate, who've seen access to the kind of perks that being friends with Putin they had enjoyed before. That's personal accountability. This other form of accountability, lies in the future, but we need to build the evidentiary record now.
We have a piece of video of yourself in Bosnia back in the day in your diplomatic career. And, just to compare the amount of devastation and the number of refugees and displaced persons that are being created now. There you are. The wars in Yugoslavia from 1991 to 2001 created 2.4 million refugees, 2 million internally displaced people, and 100,000 people were killed. Moving to Syria, 6.6 million refugees, 6.7 million internally displaced, 350,000 people killed, and that was from 2011 to today. We already have 3 million refugees in several weeks, not a year. This is an unprecedented number of displaced people. How does Europe absorb, number one, poor countries like Moldova who don't have, huge economies? Is it even possible? Because if you do the math, 3 weeks from now, it could be 6 million people. How do the surrounding countries even physically absorb this many refugees?
You're right. I mean, this is a country of 44 million people that Putin has sought to invade and appears intent on trying to destroy. And the pace of displacement we are seeing right now, I have never seen in my career. It's not only the 3 million that you mentioned that have crossed further afield into Europe and crossed the border that where so many journalists are gathered. It's the 2 to 3 million internally displaced. So already, well over 10% of the population of Ukraine displaced. And as you note, we're just a little over 2 weeks into this war. So this is something where we have to look ahead. We need to prepare for much larger influxes. If some of the bigger towns, for example, like Odessa in the south, were to be attacked, that could mean another 1 million people coming further into Europe. If you started to see larger scale evacuations being allowed, because remember, the Russian Federation isn't even allowing wholesale evacuations from major civilian centers in the east in the way that international law demands that they do. But you're right. You could see the numbers that we're seeing now pale in comparison to what we see a few weeks from now. And what that means is that it is possible for those frontline states, especially Moldova, a country of just 3 million people that's not a member of the European Union, that has never fielded a refugee flow like this before and is now at capacity with 140,000 people from Ukraine living in Moldova, but several 100,000 more have passed through Moldova and moved on to Romania and further into Europe. You will see more and more people entering Poland and then going to Germany, going to Spain, going to the country of my origins, to Ireland, which has been incredibly welcoming on a per capita basis. And I'm sure there'll be questions beyond that if this refugee flow continues. But that is why, again, our focus is on changing Putin's calculus in the here and now, just as the Ukrainian president's focus is in sitting down for diplomatic talks in the hopes that de-escalation can be achieved and that peace can be brought to this country before you start to see the doubling, the triple, even the quadrupling of population flow from what we have now.